Welcome back. In this lesson, we are going to prep our design here, our mesh for sculpting, get it all kind of moved in. We may slide our ears back a little bit, just make some adjustments and then get it ready for sculpting. So let's go ahead and dive into it. We'll open up our last save project, which was draft 12. So now we're in draft 12, our latest version here. And we're going to go ahead and prep this. First thing I'm noticing is, we got a little spike kind of sticking out the top of his head. So we may have to make just tiny adjustments on some of our Booleans. But the main thing that we need to focus when kind of going into sculpt mode is one, that we've saved it. So let's go ahead and save as, and we can just call this draft 13. But really the main thing that I kind of want you to take away from this lesson is that before we go into sculpting mode, we're going to apply the mirror modifier, because notice if we just take this base mesh into sculpt mode with Control Tab down, we lose half of our dog. And we could sculpt like that, but sometimes it can be a little tricky on the seam. So what I'm going to do is take it back into object mode, and let's just apply the mirror modifier. It's done its job up till now, and I usually don't like you guys and girls to apply modifiers, but in this case you kind of have to, or you don't really have to, but it does make the workload a little bit easier. So we can always go back to the previous version if we need to get our mesh, but I think we're okay from here. So we'll just apply the mirror, and it does take a moment, but watch the seam kind of that's down the middle of our design here. That should disappear. There we go. So you can see it's disappeared, but some of our Booleans have kind of changed. And that's because we need to take our solidify modifier and bring it above the thumb hole here. And that will open everything back up because, as we all know, the modifier stack is in order of operations. So, it is very important which order these are in. And now that solidifies up here, you can see we've got a nice hole back in our mouth, just like we had it before. So that's excellent. Now what we want to do is just lower the count, because a lot of times when we're moving around these Booleans, all these little wireframe boxes, if our base mesh still has really high multi-resolution, like we're at 3 right here, we could crank that down to like 1, something really low. Maybe something like that. Even 0, if your computer's really struggling, you can crank it on down to 0. So every time you go into object mode, you're back down to, a very low poly count. But I'm just going to keep mine at 1. I kind of like it there. That way we get some kind of the curve, but, it's really easy to change our Booleans if need be. But first thing we want to do is select the wireframe of this and just fix this little spike here. So I'm going to go to side view, do maybe Alt-Z to go into see-through mode, maybe even just Z and go into wireframe. And we're going to go into edit mode and take a look at this. So notice that, kind of a little bit of our geometry is poking out right here. So we'll just kind of grab those, maybe turn on proportional editing, or you can hit O and do G and Z and bring it on down. And I went a little too far. And the thing we don't want to do is go, too low, or it pops out of the, the skin or the thickness of our dog shell here. So that looks pretty good. Let's go back into object mode. Maybe hit period, just kind of center around that. And let's turn solid back on and turn off see-through. So now, if you zoom out, you see how I'm getting kind of the very tops of these points. It's kind of letting me know it may be a little too close. So maybe just do G and Z and just bring them down ever so slightly. I don't even know if you guys can see that, but it's just barely poking out of the top of the head. There we go. So that looks good. Maybe look inside there, make sure our Boolean's still there. It looks good. And if we go back into object mode, we should get it nice and there. Yeah. So now we got a nice little spike there. That's looking pretty good. But I do notice down here at the bottom, I don't know if this is with your mesh as well, but it looks like one of our Booleans is kind of eating through the dog layer there. So sometimes you will have, kind of strange thing happen when you apply the modifier, the mirror modifier. So let's just go ahead and hide the base here so we can kind of see what's going on in there. And so this is our issue here. If we just click on our dog head, we can kind of, turn on and off some of these booleans. And I'm thinking that it's the roll hole here. So I'm just going to turn that one off and see if it, yeah. So it looks like it is that, definitely the roll hole. So what we need to do is just take our roll hole, and it's up here in our objects, right? This guy right here, and just take it into edit mode. So I'm just going to tab into edit mode, and there's our culprit right there. See how he's kind of poking out of the shell of the dog? We've got a few options here. We can, extend the size of our dog mesh here, or we can change the size here. I'm just going to select all with A, and maybe turn off our proportional editing with O. And let's just scale around the 3D cursor here, right in the center. So we'll just hit S and just bring that in ever so slightly until it kind of brings back into the dog shell here. So almost there, just a little bit more. And if your computer is running really slow, you may want to make sure your multi-resolution is turned down. But that's looking pretty good. The only thing I've noticed is that we're getting these little pieces that are kind of coming into the threading here. So I'm just going to hit S and just scale it up ever so slightly. Oh, just a little bit more, because we don't want that poking through there. So I'm just barely moving my mouse. Oh, and I went a little too crazy there. So I'm just kind of, we're just making micro adjustments just to make sure everything's nice and clean. So it's not poking out there. It's not doing that. And let's go back to object mode and kind of check up here. Yeah, so it looks like a little bit of the roll hole is kind of cutting into that too. So we could even drop it down. So let's tab back in. Still have it selected. Do G and Z. And just bring it right to the top of those threadings. Just somewhere. And this is just me being particular, but you just want to look over your mesh and just make sure everything's looking the way you want it. That way you don't have to do a bunch of reprints and, do a bunch of stuff. Just kind of always try and get it as close as you can in the design software. So let's go ahead and tab back over. Yeah, so that's looking pretty clean. We've got a nice clearance. We've got enough room for our threads here, and it's not breaking through our dog shell there. So that's excellent. So we'll go ahead and save. And now what we want to do is get this ready to go into sculpting mode. So one thing I do know that we're going to need in sculpting mode are our reference photos that we took at the very beginning of this lesson. So you should still have them nestled away inside of your dog head layer if you parented them earlier, or in the very first few lessons. And you can just turn those back on. And mine are turning kind of this pink color. And if you ever have that issue, it's saying that it doesn't know where the photos are, because I kind of changed the location. But that's okay. Just click on one of them, go to your little photo tab, and then there's a folder tab, and then just navigate to where those pictures are. So mine are right in here, and you can see by the number still 0003. So it's this one. And there we go, right there. Click on this one and do the same thing. And this one says 7. So that's it right here, still 7. And there we go. And make sure that your only access is aligned. If you have that checked, it's only going to show you the photo if you're on like the, side, kind of right orthographic aligned view. So just make sure that's off on both of the photos so we can see them, in all directions. And that's looking pretty good. We are going to go ahead and take this design into kind of sculpting mode to get it ready. But before we do that, I just want to look at this side. And so notice that, our ears are a little bit different right here, but that's okay. We're just going to make them a little larger from the front up here. But now we are ready to get to sculpting. So if you are ready to sculpt, let's just go ahead and click on the dog head mesh. You can go ahead and twiddle that up. And we're going to go into our multi-res and flip into sculpt mode. So do Control Tab down, flip over to sculpt mode. And mine kind of has a bug here. So you can't really see my geometry. So I just kind of have to refresh it, kind of toggle it down, toggle it back up once. So if you're having that issue, you shouldn't, but I'm in alpha, so it may be something that I'm doing. But what I do want you to do, so very important, since we applied the mirror modifier, anything we sculpt on this side is not going to happen on this side unless we check this little box for the enable X symmetry. So once we click that, anything we do on this side will happen on this side. But I don't want to go too deep into the sculpting here. I just wanted to get you to this point, ready for sculpting. And let's actually turn on our matte caps right here and get ready for sculpting. And matte caps are just something, kind of a look that helps kind of see your shadows and just is a little bit easier when we go to sculpt. But let's go ahead and jump into the next lesson where we're going to do our broad sculpting.